Hello everyone, this is Joel Kennedy with Kennedy Violins. Today we're going to be talking about the different types of bows. There's so many bows out there. Which ones do you buy? Well, today I'm going to try to very simply and easily and quickly answer all your questions. Okay, so there's 4 characteristics of a bow that you want to think about when you're making your decision whether to buy the bow or not. So number 1 would be the sound that the bow produces. Number 2 would be the playability of the bow, or the bounce characteristics. Number 3 would be durability. And number 4 would be the cost. So basically, when you're buying a bow, your primary decision is basically how many of those characteristics are you willing to compromise on, and how much are you willing to compromise in terms of price, right? So obviously, if you spent an infinite amount of dollars, you would get an infinitely great bow. If you spent the least amount of dollars, you would get the least worthy bow. So whatever, you basically have to budget a certain amount depending on how much of those characteristics that you think you need. So let's talk about the different types of bows. Okay, so the first kind of bow is a fiberglass bow. The second kind of bow is a carbon fiber bow. The third kind of bow is like a high quality wood bow. Those are probably the most common bows that you'll find. And the fourth would be a Pernambuco bow, which represents the most expensive, generally the professional quality bow that you'd find most professional players using. So let's talk about those different types really quick. So number 1, you have fiberglass bow. So the pros of a fiberglass bow is that they are very strong. So these bows are very good for, maybe using as a rental, like if you're a shop and you want to rent a bow, because you're going to have kids that are going to abuse them, throw them around, play swords with them, and also for schools, right? So schools, a lot of times they'll offer bows for their kids, to use, and so the bows are very durable and they're inexpensive. So the downside of these bows is that they're ugly, they're heavy, they have terrible performance characteristics. And that's about it. So they're pretty much awful in every way, except they're very durable and they're inexpensive. They also usually have synthetic horsehair. Synthetic horsehair is not something that you generally want to get because it doesn't hold rosin very well a lot of the time, and it doesn't have the same kind of bite that real horsehair has, and it often doesn't produce the kind of sound that you want either. So that's fiberglass bows. Those are not very popular these days. Now, number 2 would be a carbon fiber bow. Now, there's a lot that I can say about carbon fiber bows. Now, carbon fiber bows used to be a good alternative to a fiberglass bow. So they're durable, they're very strong, they'll last a long time. They don't care really about humidity. How dry is it? How wet is it? A lot of people use them for outdoor use, so they're great for that purpose. Another thing about carbon fiber bows is that they're very, very, very consistent. So you can buy a carbon fiber bow based off of brand. Now, you can't really, most of the time, buy a bow based off of brand. You really have to, because they're not toasters. Every bow is different because they're made out of wood. It's a living substance. But a carbon fiber bow kind of is like a toaster to some extent. They make them in a shop, factory, whatever you want to call it, and they're very, very consistent. So you can find a brand that you like, and then you can buy several of those bows and have a pretty reasonable expectation that the bows are probably going to be the same. So there's a lot of advantage with that. Now, the issue with carbon fiber bows, and it has been for a long time, is that even though the bounce characteristics had gotten very, very good, the sound quality was always pretty poor. It was overly aggressive, kind of scratchy, a little bit bright, wasn't particularly warm. However, in the past 20 years, the disadvantages to a carbon fiber bow have changed a lot. In fact, there's some manufacturers like Coda, for example. No, I'm not being paid by Coda to say this. I personally use a Coda bow as my backup bow. A lot of my advanced students in the past have used Coda bows. We sell Coda bows. A lot of people sell. So they're very popular bows. But Coda was one of the first companies that I'm aware of who kind of solved the sound issue. So while the most expensive Coda bows, in my opinion, don't sound as good as the most expensive Pernambuco bows, they're come pretty close. So you really can get a pretty good sounding bow with excellent bounce characteristics and durability characteristics at a pretty good price in buying a well-known carbon fiber brand like Coda. So I guess the biggest advantage with buying a carbon fiber bow is that you get a lot of characteristics that you want. You can get decent sound, you can get great bouncing characteristics, you can get durability, you can get a bow that looks pretty cool too, but you're not going to pay a whole lot of money. So you might spend, let's say, $1,500, or you could even spend less than $1,000 on a carbon fiber bow that while it won't be as good as a, you know, $5,000 or $6,000 Pernambuco bow, it might be 90% as good. Now, if you're a professional player, well, that 10%, you know, you need that 10%. But if you're not a professional player and you're just an advanced player, or you just want the best bow that you can get for the money, you pretty much can't beat carbon fiber. Now, there's a lot of carbon fiber bows out there that are, you know, a lot of kind of Chinese knockoffs, and some are better than others. Some of them are okay, and some of them are actually pretty decent. So you really just have to play them, or just go by the manufacturer's, you know, the brand reputation to kind of determine whether they're a decent bow or not. You know, if they have a label on the bow, that's a pretty good indication that, you know, at least they're branded. But you probably wouldn't want to buy a carbon fiber bow that didn't have like a brand or something on it. Okay, so that's carbon fiber bows. Now, if you have any other questions about this stuff, hey, feel free to ask me. There's a lot more questions I know you guys can ask. Okay, so number 3 would be a high quality wood bow. Now, most bows that you'll find with violins or any string instruments are going to be made out of a high quality bow. And these bows are usually referred to as Brazil wood bow. Now, there's a very big misconception in the violin world that there's Brazil wood bows and then there's Pernambuco bows, and that both of these bows come from Brazil. It's just that one wood is higher quality than others, but it's actually not true. Most of the wood that's purported to be Brazil wood is actually bullet wood, what's commonly known as bullet wood. But there's a lot of different names for it. Every country's got their own different names, but bullet wood is one of the primary names that it goes by. And it's a wood that's very similar to Pernambuco. It's got a lot of the same characteristics. It's very dense, it bounces very well, it's very good to work with, and it's fairly plentiful. Most of the wood comes from China. So most of the wood bows that you buy for, you know, less than $500, or even a lot of times less than $1,000 sometimes, are not going to be made out of any type of wood that's, you know, from Brazil. It's going to be, you know, wood that's probably very similar to Brazil wood. Now, there are some really cheap bows that come with some of the really cheap violins that are, you know, let's say sub $200, that, you know, the bows, they're not even made out of bullet wood. I don't know what they're made out of. Something, it's a little bit better than cardboard, but it's really bad. So there's a million different names for it, but you can buy some really, really poor quality wood bows. But most of the bows that are, say, you know, maybe, you know, $100 and above, or even sometimes $60 and above, are going to be made out of this bullet wood. And as long as the wood is carved properly and the hair is put on reasonably well, the bows will be fine. They're inexpensive to replace, and they usually work pretty well. But you really, with a wood bow, you know, it's a subjective thing, but if you have a chance to play the bow, if you're looking for a bow, right? You're not looking to buy a violin that comes with a bow, but you're looking for a bow, then the best thing that you can do is play the bow. Just play the bow, or have somebody that you respect and, you know, you like their opinion, have them play the bow for you and tell them what you think if you're shopping for a bow. It's very hard to buy a bow based off of brand, so you'd want to actually play the bow and see if you like it or not. But like I said, with carbon fiber, you can be more brand motivated. You can buy a brand of bow, and if you like your buddy's bow, well, chances are if you buy that same brand and model, your bow is going to be really similar because, you know, they're a manufactured product. Okay, so then the last on the list you have is a Pernambuco bow. Now, Pernambuco, that's wood that actually came from Brazil, and it has the best bounce characteristics, the best sound, generally speaking. You know, usually if somebody is making, you know, a bow out of Pernambuco, they probably know what they're doing, and they're making the bow properly. Now, the reason why it's difficult to obtain Pernambuco and it's expensive is that it's, as far as last time I heard, buying Pernambuco from Brazil was illegal. You can't legally buy Pernambuco from Brazil anymore. However, you can buy the bows when they're already completed. So if you want to buy a Pernambuco bow, you either A, have to buy a bow that's made in Brazil by a Brazilian maker, let's say, and you know, because that's legal to buy the bow, just not the wood. Or you have to buy, or you buy a used bow, or you can buy a new bow from a company that, you know, purchased their stock of Pernambuco years before the law went into effect. So there are some companies, especially in Europe, where they have a ton of Pernambuco wood that they bought over the, you know, the last century or whatever, and they've got a huge stock. So they're still able to produce high quality new Pernambuco bows. Now there are a few exceptions to that. You can legally, in some instances, buy Pernambuco when it's not a bow out of Brazil, but that's if, you know, the wood was cut down for some other purpose. Let's say it's used for fencing or something like that. So some people these days are going into Brazil, finding old fence posts that's made out of Pernambuco, and then buying that wood legally and then making bows out of that. So there are a few exceptions, but as a general rule, you know, that's the way it is. Okay, so I've tried to cram a lot into this video as quickly as I can, so it's not, you know, a marathon video. Feel free to ask me some more questions. I'm sure you guys will have some more questions. You know, you're probably wondering, well, you know, I'm a beginner player, I'm an intermediate player, I'm an advanced player. You didn't really answer my question. What should I buy? Well, okay, ask me some questions in the video and maybe I can speak to your specific situation. But as a beginner, you're pretty much just looking for, you know, a bow that's made properly and has the hair put in properly. That's really what you're looking for. So to some extent, buy from a company or buy from a shop that you trust, and more than likely they'll sell you a bow that's made properly and the hair has been put in properly. If you want to be guaranteed that your bow is going to produce more sound, be more responsive, and you don't have to worry about humidity levels and stuff like that, then you could probably just buy a carbon fiber bow. You know, and that'll probably be fine for you, and you're going to have less risk buying a bow that's really, really bad. And you can still buy carbon fiber bows, some pretty decent ones for, you know, less than $100 or around $100. You can buy some pretty decent ones, so that could be a pretty safe bet. Now, let's say you're an advanced player, then I would recommend you could get a carbon fiber bow, but buy a well-known brand. You know, preferably one that's made in America, and you might have to pay, you know, up to $1,500 for it, but that bow might be almost as good as a $5,000 or $6,000 or $10,000 Pernambuco bow. So that might be a very economical way for you to get a bow that bounces really well. It's super resilient and durable, and produces a pretty decent sound as well. Now, of course, if you're a really advanced player and, you know, money isn't really much of an object, then you can buy a Pernambuco bow, but hey, go shopping. Don't just buy a Pernambuco bow online. I would definitely not do that unless they've got a really, really good return policy. You got to go to a shop and you've got to try out the bows. But here's a caveat, and perhaps I'm providing too much information here, okay? This is my opinion, but most bow makers put in too much hair. So most bows will have, let's say a violin bow will have about 150 to 200 hairs in it. In general, if the bow has got too much hair in it, what it does is it deadens the sound. So if you are a person who has advanced spiccato technique using saudiers and stuff like that, you need to make sure that your bow was rehaired by a person who's not putting too much hair in. It can't just look pretty. It has to have the minimum amount of hair, but no more hair than it needs, so the bow produces is the best sound that it can, and it's as responsive as it can be. Because if you're playing some very, very delicate passages with some advanced spiccato techniques, you don't want a hair. You don't want a bow that's got too much hair in it and deadens your sound. So guys, I hope I answered some of your questions. Like I said before, hey, you know, let me know if you've got any other additional questions. On Instagram, you can DM me. I'll respond. On YouTube, write the comments down below. Of course, you can go to Joel's Corner on KennedyViolins.com. All my videos are there. Of course, everything is free, you know, and I respond to all my emails as well. Don't forget to subscribe. Hit that alert bell because you'll get a notification when I create a new video. I'm always making new videos, and so you'll be alerted when I put up a new video. And don't forget, you know, here at Kennedy Violins, you know, we're a little bit special. You know, we are players and teachers, so we understand you. We know what you need because, you know, we are you. So feel free to contact us anytime. You know, we're always happy to answer any kind of questions you guys have anytime. Thanks, guys.